The airport police officer looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Ma'am, are these children yours?" Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. I glanced down, expecting my younger sister to apologize for taking so long. But instead, I read 6 words that turned my knees weak. "They're your problem now. Goodbye." Looked through the giant terminal windows, just in time to see her plane, lifting off for the Caribbean. My 18-month-old niece was crying so hard she could barely breathe, while her twin brother clung to my leg with both little hands. I hadn't even known Melissa had bought a ticket out of the country. 1 hour earlier, she'd smiled, hugged me, handed me the stroller and said, "Watch them while I grab us some coffee." I believed her because she was my sister. I'd trusted that smile my whole life. I searched every coffee shop, every restroom, every gift store, even the chapel near the end of the terminal. I called her again and again until every call went straight to voicemail. Then my number was blocked. I'll tell you what, I wasn't born yesterday. And I knew this wasn't a woman running late. This was a woman walking away from her own children. The officer asked if there was anyone else who could take the twins. I quietly shook my head. Our parents had been gone for years. Their father had disappeared before the babies were born, and I was the only family left. Airport security reviewed the surveillance cameras while a social worker sat beside me trying to calm the twins with crackers and juice. 20 minutes later, an airline supervisor returned holding a boarding record. He spoke softly, almost like he hated saying the words. "Your sister boarded that flight alone, ma'am. She checked one suitcase and never listed the children on her reservation." My stomach dropped. This hadn't been panic. It had been planned. As the social worker handed me the diaper bag, she noticed it felt unusually heavy. "You'd better look inside before you leave," she said. I unzipped it, expecting bottles and diapers. But buried beneath a baby blanket was a thick, manila envelope with my name written, across the front in Melissa's handwriting. My hands started trembling when I turned it over and saw 4 words that made me afraid to open it. "If you love them, read alone." I kept staring at those 4 words. "If you love them, read alone." For a moment, I almost opened the envelope right there beside the airport window, but something told me not to. I slipped it back into the diaper bag, thanked the social worker, and carried the twins to my old Buick. The little girl fell asleep before I pulled out of the parking garage, still holding my finger, while her brother clutched the stuffed rabbit I'd won for him at last year's county fair. The drive back to my small town outside Murfreesboro, Tennessee, felt longer than it ever had. Rain tapped against the windshield. The tires hummed along the interstate, and my mind kept replaying Melissa's smile. It wasn't the smile that haunted me. It was how calm she'd looked. She hadn't been frightened. She hadn't been confused. She had known exactly what she was doing. That realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. By the time I reached my house, the porch light was glowing, and the old screen door creaked as I carried the twins inside. My neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn, spotted me from across the yard. She looked at the children, then back at me. "I thought Melissa was traveling with you," she said. I forced a smile that didn't feel real. Plans changed. Folks notice more than people think. She didn't ask another question. Less than 20 minutes later, she quietly left a casserole, fresh milk, and a package of diapers on my porch before driving away. After baths, warm bottles, and nearly an hour of rocking, the twins finally drifted to sleep in the spare bedroom that had once belonged to my son. The house grew so quiet. I could hear the old ceiling fan clicking overhead and the coffee maker humming in the kitchen. I carried the envelope to the table, took a deep breath, and broke the seal. There wasn't a letter inside. There were copies of bank statements showing hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through accounts I'd never seen before. A passport application stamped just 6 days earlier, and a property deed for my late parents' farmhouse. I stared at the document until my eyes blurred. According to the paperwork, Melissa had sold the farm 3 days before leaving the country. That couldn't be right. Mama's will had left the property to both of us equally, and I'd never signed a single document agreeing to sell it. Then another folded page slipped onto the table. It wasn't addressed to me. It was a handwritten note from Melissa that simply read, "Linda, if anyone tells you Uncle Ray was trying to help me, don't believe a single word. He started this." I barely slept that night. Every time the old farmhouse creaked, or one of the twins stirred down the hall, my eyes opened. Before sunrise, I spread every paper across my kitchen table and read them again. Slower this time. Something caught my attention that I'd missed before. One of the bank statements showed a wire transfer for almost $300,000, just one day after the farmhouse was supposedly sold. But the money hadn't gone into Melissa's account. It had been sent to a company I'd never heard of. That didn't sit right. After dropping the twins at the church daycare, I drove straight to the county courthouse with the folder tucked under my arm. The clerk behind the records counter recognized me from settling Mama's estate years earlier. She studied the deed, typed quietly for several minutes, then frowned. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "according to these records, your signature was notarized." I looked her square in the eye. "I've never signed that paper." Her fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. She printed another copy, laid it beside the first, and whispered, "Then we've got a serious problem." She handed me the name of the notary and suggested I speak with an attorney before contacting anyone else. An hour later, I sat across from Harold Benson, an older attorney whose office smelled of old paper and black coffee. He listened without interrupting while I told him everything from the airport to the envelope to Melissa's note about Uncle Ray. When I finished, he adjusted his glasses, compared my genuine signature from Mama's probate file with the one on the deed, and stayed silent long enough to make me nervous. Finally, he said, "Linda, signatures don't usually lie, but forgeries do." He explained that proving fraud required evidence, not anger, and advised me to let him begin quietly gathering records before anyone knew we were asking questions. I agreed. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted the truth. 3 weeks passed. Life settled into a routine of diapers, daycare, grocery shopping, and bedtime stories while Attorney Benson worked behind the scenes. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. His voice was calm, but I could hear something different beneath it. "Linda," he said, "I found the notary." I gripped the phone tighter. "She swears she never notarized your signature." He paused just long enough for my heart to race, before adding, "And she has security footage, showing exactly who walked into that office, pretending to be you." I was sitting on my front porch shelling green beans when Attorney Benson called, told me this wasn't the kind of conversation to have over the phone. I drove straight to his office while Mrs. Evelyn watched the twins. The courthouse square was quiet, and the smell of rain still lingered in the air as I stepped inside. Without saying much, Mr. Benson turned his computer toward me and pressed play. The security footage showed Melissa walking into the title office, carrying the same brown folder I'd found in the diaper bag. A few steps behind her was Uncle Ray. My heart sank, but I kept watching. Melissa looked nervous, constantly glancing toward the door. Uncle Ray, on the other hand, looked perfectly comfortable. He spoke with the receptionist, pointed toward the documents, then motioned for another woman waiting nearby to step forward. She signed the papers using my name. It wasn't even close to my handwriting. A few minutes later, the notary shook her head and refused to stamp the documents. The video showed Uncle Ray growing visibly irritated before grabbing the folder and leaving. "The sale still happened?" I whispered. Mr. Benson nodded. "Yes, but not here. Someone found another notary willing to ignore the law." 2 days later, we filed a petition asking the court to freeze every remaining dollar from the farmhouse sale until the investigation was complete. The judge signed the order that same afternoon. For the first time since the airport, I felt like the truth was finally catching up with the lies. Word traveled fast through our little town. Folks didn't gossip in front of me, but I noticed conversations stopping when I walked into the diner or the grocery store. Then, just before sunset one evening, Uncle Ray pulled into my driveway. He climbed out of his pickup wearing the same easy smile he'd worn my whole life. "Linda," he said, "you're making a mistake." Melissa knew exactly what she was doing. I looked at him without inviting him inside. "Then why did someone else sign my name?" His smile faded for just a second. "Sometimes family has to make hard decisions." I folded my arms. "No, Ray, family doesn't steal from family." He stared at me for a long moment before quietly saying, "You ought to let this go." I shook my head. "That dog won't hunt." He drove away without another word. The very next morning, Attorney Benson called again. "We finally located Melissa," he said. I closed my eyes, hardly able to breathe. Then he spoke the words I never expected to hear. "She's coming back. And she says, Uncle Ray threatened to destroy her life if she ever told you the truth." 2 months later, I found myself sitting on a hard wooden bench inside our county courthouse. watching Melissa walk through the same doors she'd spent nearly 2 years avoiding. She looked thinner than I remembered, and the confidence she used to carry had been replaced by quiet regret. She glanced toward the twins for only a moment before lowering her eyes. She didn't ask them to come to her, and they didn't run to her. Some distances can't be crossed with a single apology. Under oath, Melissa admitted she had made the worst decision of her life. She testified that Uncle Ray had convinced her the farmhouse belonged entirely to her after our parents died and promised he knew. People who could handle the paperwork. When she questioned the forged signatures, he told her it was only a formality and that I would never know. By the time she realized the property had been sold illegally and most of the money had disappeared into accounts she couldn't access, she panicked. Instead of facing what she'd done, she ran. She believed leaving the twins with me would protect them from the people Uncle Ray had involved, but she admitted there was no excuse for abandoning her children at that airport. Attorney Benson presented the surveillance footage, the bank records, the handwriting expert's report, and testimony from the notary, who had refused to participate in the fraud. Piece by piece, the truth came together without anyone raising their voice. The judge ruled that the deed transferring the farmhouse had been obtained through fraud, ordered the remaining proceeds recovered, and referred the forged documents for criminal investigation. Uncle Ray walked out of the courthouse that day without saying a word. In a town like ours, people didn't need headlines to know who had betrayed his own family. His pew at church stayed empty. Neighbors stopped asking for his advice, and the respect he'd spent a lifetime building disappeared. One quiet conversation at a time, Melissa accepted every condition the family court imposed. She entered counseling, paid child support, and slowly began supervised visits with the twins. Trust wasn't something the court could award. It had to be earned, and she knew it. As for me, the judge granted me permanent legal guardianship. Life settled into simple routines again. Sunday church, pancakes on Saturday mornings, bedtime stories, and fireflies dancing across the backyard on warm Tennessee evenings. Sometimes people ask me how I found the strength to keep going after my own sister walked away. I always give them the same answer. The truth may take the long road, but it never forgets the way home.